G'day, how's it going? Okay, so yesterday we looked at the roots, or beginning to ask you to consider whether there are, for some of you, events or particularly events that occurred that might have affected you. And so I hope for those of you that this is relevant for, that you've had a chance to do it. If not, there's no hurry. You spent all of your life being how you are, so you're not necessarily going to get completely changed in a week. But the two questions I wanted you to ask yourself were, what is wrong, what is the behaviour, and when did it start? And so what we want to start to look at now is what happens when an event or a situation affects us. What is our reaction to that event that starts to set up our future? So we have an event, and we're generally talking about something tragic, not in the sense of something negative, obviously. And so what happens next is that as soon as we want to acknowledge that situation, there are typically two reactions that we have that are equally unhealthy. One is pride, not in a oh, I'm really proud sense itself, but what we endeavour to do when pride functions as a result to an event is that we try and meet our needs ourselves. So we become self-contained. We tend to say, it's no one else's business. This shouldn't have happened to me, and so we internalise it. And the flip side of that, although often that's sometimes as internalised earlier on, is shame. And this is very, very common, very debilitating. Our culture is rotten with it. And what shame is shame is like a blanket that covers us. And what shame tells us is it says that I am no good. That there is something wrong with me. And it's not just acknowledging that this event has happened, that would be healthy, but there's something wrong with me. So shame attacks us in our soul, and more particularly in our spirit, because it's that I am no good. It's not that a bad thing has happened to me, but I am no good and there is something wrong with me. And pride sometimes will kick in with that as well and say, I'm too good for this to have happened to me anyway. So when we have one of these reactions to an event, this starts to set up the issues that many of us are facing in our lives as adults. And there is a healthy aspect of shame, of feeling bad about something that we've done, but we tend to often walk in very unhealthy shame. And an expression I use a lot is actually shame-based cultures. In a shame-based culture, they use shame to control people. Very common in Pacific Island culture. And even amongst street kids, I used to run a foster home for street kids, and they would say, "Oh, shame, man," or "shame on you." And I know it's just become a cliche, but in very real terms, what the situations they would say that is highlighting somebody doing something silly, weird, or dumb, and exposing it. And so it's an issue that we universally almost have to deal with, how to come out from under shame. So I just want you to, the next thing for you to start to have a think about is have I responded? Is this something that I see operating in my life? When I think about myself at the core of my being, do I think that I'm no good? Do I think there's something fundamentally wrong with me? Do I tend to very quickly take responsibility for things that may or may not be my issue? Those of you who've reacted more down the pride route probably won't be watching this, because you'll be going, my life is okay and everything is fine. And for example, when I've been involved in working with the gay community, I'm honest, in all honesty, I'm yet to meet a gay person who was not sexually abused as a child. Never met one, ever. Now, so their reaction is a combination of both. Adult gays the reason that they are dressed immaculately, the reason that they're successful, the reason their houses are spotless, and all those things is this sort of pride. Not the right sort of pride, but this sort of pride that has taken them down a path since they were abused as children. And shame goes with that as well because of the lifestyle. But they both operate very powerfully in many of us. So as I've said before, what I'm talking about here is just to try and help those of you who can identify an event and to look at what your reaction might be. Now, the other thing is, for those of you who can't remember an event but who are relating to this is kind of the bells are going off, but no, I'm not aware of anything that happened. Just deciding whether, yeah, I will. I'll touch on it briefly now, is this. That sometimes things can happen to us even before we're born. Now, you might think that's a little strange, but what I believe is that our spirits, remember I talked in the first evening about spirit, soul and body, right? Now, our spirit and our soul are formed. They don't grow in the womb. It's our body that grows in the womb. And the Bible says that at the moment of conception, it actually says that before God created the world, he knew that you'd be sitting here. So he had your picture on his wall. That's how much he cares about you. So then he decided who your parents would be and put your spirit and your soul into the body that came along. So if you can begin to get your head around that, what that means is that spiritually we were fully alive the moment we were conceived. Now, some situations where people have really struggled, particularly with low self-esteem and self-hatred and depression and things, very often, it can be traced back to a few things. One of the biggest by far, huge issue, adoption. Because if you've been adopted, and often remember the adoption process is going on before you're born, right? So what's happening is that because your spirit, you're inside your mum, but because your spirit is already alive, you're able to comprehend a lot more than people think. And so you know that your mother doesn't want you. Now what that sets up is like a toxic shame, because you're being rejected before you're even being born. And I've met and worked with countless people now who, when they find out that they are adopted, or if they grow up even knowing, they reach a point where they often will just really fall apart, and often it creates significant issues in people's lives. Now, similar to that is even if you weren't adopted, but you were an unwanted pregnancy, it actually sets up rejection in the womb. And another one is, which is very closely, related to that, is as if you're a child of rape or something similar. Now, also on top of that, not quite at the same level, but also significant trauma in your mum, significant trauma in the mother, can often have a significant effect. So we all understand things like, drinking. If you're an alcoholic and you're drinking and you're pregnant, and that can cause physical brain damage. But there are many things that you might be doing that can be affecting a child in its soul and in its spirit. Children of prostitutes, for example, where they're bonding with man after man after man, just shreds an unborn child's spirit. Attempted abortions, all of those things. So you'll either relate to this or you won't. My experience commonly is God's either speaking to you about this or he isn't. It'll be relevant to you, or it'll just be, well, that's really interesting and I've never heard anything like this. But if you know that it's ringing some bells with you, don't be afraid of that. I can only encourage you to take it to God, keep watching as we go forward, understand that I'm just taking you down a path of what we have on what we do to ourselves and what our parents inadvertently do to us and what society does to us. And as we head further down the track of identifying the issues, then we can start to look at how to get healed from it. All right, so just to summarise, I don't want to make each session too long. I've asked you to think about what are the things that you identify as the issues in your life, and can you look at a time when they started? And if you've been able to do that, or when you do get around to that, then to look at what was my reaction? Am I aware of a reaction or a path? Did I start to walk in shame? Did I start to walk in pride? And then, if I'm not aware of an event, does any of this ring any bells? Is any of this true in my family or in my life? And is that somewhere where I should be looking at stuff that has affected me? So just to make sure that I continue as I should, what we'll talk about tomorrow is, so following on directly from here, is one of the ways that we react to an event, whether particularly if we're on the shame side, is that we defensively detach. And I'll explain that and go into that in some detail tomorrow night. Thank you again for your time. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a great evening. Bye.